Hello everyone and welcome back to the space where we say that I can sleep. I hope you all are enjoying the weather as much as you can, especially if it's super hot for you because it has started to really heat up again. So it is the time to fill up your coolers, put water bottles in refrigerators, go out swimming, anything you can to stay cool in this heat of hell. But this is where we can escape from all that and probably rest up as much as we can. So, as per usual, if you are enjoying these readings and would like for me to continue doing these readings, you can show your support by leaving me likes, leaving me comments, sharing my stuff, and even following me on all my platforms like Spotify at iKenSleep, YouTube at iKenWin, TikTok at iKenWin, and Instagram at officially.iKenWin. Now let's ascend into chapter 38 of Heaven Official's Blessing. From the earth of Buyou Forest, human face disease emerges. The man was tall and burly, and many on the streets were sent tumbling and complained loudly as he hurtled past them in his crazed dash. What gives? It's already such a hot day. Why is he running around so heated? Wow, it's my first time seeing someone dash past without putting their best face forward. Many started laughing as they commented, since they weren't genuinely angry. But as that man blindly rampaged with his hands over his face, he collided head-on with a large, luxurious horse-drawn carriage, and blood splattered right there on the streets. He fell backward onto the ground in a heap, and the pedestrians who'd been joking around screamed at the sight. The carriage's owner was shocked as well, and he poked his head out to ask, "Who was that? Who crashed into me?" Everything had happened so suddenly, Shilian had to put the matter with the boy on the back burner for now. He rushed over. "What happened?" The man who had rammed his head into the carriage seemed to have passed out, and his disheveled hair blocked his face. A small crowd had formed around him and was watching carefully. Before Shilian got close, the man suddenly leapt up in a fit and wailed. "I can't stand it anymore! Someone! Someone kill me! Quick, someone come kill me! Please!" A few of the burly men passing by couldn't watch anymore and commented, "Which household let their lunatic loose? Take him away, jeez." They walked up to arrest the man, but when they approached and saw his face close, they all screamed and backed away in a hurry. "What is this monster?" The madman chased after them, crying manically, "Beat me to death! Hurry!" The men were horrified. As Shilian approached and they recognized His Highness the Crown Prince, they rushed to hide behind him like he was a divine reprieve. Without so much as a blink, Shilian gave a swift but controlled kick to knock that madman down, and he was sent tumbling into the mud, filthy as a dog. Some pointed at him. "Your Highness, this man, he has... No need for them to point it out. Shilian saw it too. This man had two faces. More precisely, it was one face with another sprouting from it. That second face was about the size of his palm, squished on half of the madman's cheek. Although the man was young, that small face was that of a wrinkly old man, and ugly to the core. Shilian was also shocked to the core. His mind was filled with only one thought. What is this monster? He immediately unsheathed the sword that hung at his waist. It was Hung Jing, the enchanted sword gifted to him by the Heavenly Emperor. Ever since he first encountered that white-clothed creature, he had kept the sword on him at all times in case there was a need for it. Just maybe, he'd get to see that creature's true form. But the sword was certainly useful for other circumstances as well. Once unsheathed, the shine of that blade was brighter than snow. Yet when he checked the reflection, it was no different from what he saw before him. It still showed this man, and it still showed both terrifying faces. That meant this madman was no monster or demon. He was human. But was there really anyone in the world with such a horrifying appearance? If he was born this way, how was he unknown within the capital for so many years? Shilian was still bewildered when someone in the crowd suddenly spoke with a trembling voice. How did this happen to him? Shilian immediately sheathed Tongjing and turned to the man. You know him? Was he not like this before? A number of people replied. We know him. We work with him. Of course he wasn't like this. Before, his face. How could that happen to his face? The onlooking crowd was growing bigger, almost to the point of blocking the whole main street. With a grave expression, Shilian took a deep breath and shouted loudly and clearly. Do not come any closer, everyone. There is nothing wrong, so break it up. The bandaged boy was helping him keep the crowd away, but Shilian didn't notice. He was too busy calling for Fangshan and Muqing in the communication array. Come quickly to the capital's Grand Avenue of Divine Might. After lowering his hand, he saw another person close by who looked exceedingly hesitant, hemming and hawing. Shilian took a step toward him. Do you have something you want to say? Do you have something you want to say? With the Crown Prince's curry, that man seemed to have found his courage. Your Highness, there's something that I'm not sure I should tell you. Shilian had no time to listen to him dawdle and bluntly cut him off. Get to the point. A few days ago, some bumps appeared on my chest. 3 big ones and 2 small ones. I didn't feel anything. They didn't itch or hurt. They actually felt pretty good when you pick at them. I didn't think much of them. But seeing this guy here, I'm feeling a little... got an itch or something. He laughed flatly and untied his robe, showing his chest. There's nothing wrong with me, is there? The moment he took his robe off, everyone fell silent. It wasn't just some bumps on that man's chest. It was clearly a woman's face, with all 5 of her features indistinct, but intact. That man looked down in shock. When did it get like this? It wasn't that... Lifelike? Realistic? No matter what adjective was used, it was sheer horror. Everyone around was terrified, and in spite of himself, that man grabbed onto the hem of Shilian's robe and cried, Your Highness, save me! Fangshan and Muqing arrived at that point and have rushed over from the city towers after receiving his summons. At the sight before them, they both furrowed their brows. Stand back! Fangshan shouted. What are you playing at? Shilian didn't have the time to explain. He patted the man's shoulders and comforted him. Do not worry. Stay calm. His tone of voice was warm and firm, serious but kind. The man thought Shilian had everything under control and believed without a doubt that a small matter like this was nothing to His Highness the Crown Prince, and so he relaxed. However, Shilian's mind was in turmoil. That human face was something that had grown gradually, and those symptoms, he would call them symptoms for now, were affecting more than one person. Dare he assume there was even more cases? He immediately gave Fangshan and Muqing a rough account. Report this to the palace, he commanded. Pass down this order. Search the whole city and see if there is anyone else with similar afflictions. Do not miss a single one. Because the matter was so shocking, once the king received the news, he made it a priority, dispatching a large number of men to search and investigate. They were highly efficient and effective, and by that night, it was confirmed that there were already 5 people in the imperial capital with faintly visible faces growing on their bodies. Of those 5, either they'd seen them, but didn't pay them any mind, or the faces were growing in areas not easily detected. In addition, the faces didn't itch or hurt, so those affected didn't notice right away. Beyond that, there were over a dozen others who had shallow bumps growing on their bodies. No doubt the still immature faces. Women and youths made up the majority of this group of 20-some people. Filled with clear unease as they were sent forth before Shilian, they greeted and comforted one another as they milled about. Initially, Shilian was speaking to someone on the side to address some business, but when he noticed this close camaraderie, he felt something was amiss. "Do you all know each other?" he asked. The officials running about had worked all night. They briefly glanced at their reports and replied, "Your Highness, many of them live on the outskirts of the capital, fairly close together. Maybe they've crossed paths as neighbors." Many of the affected were from the same area? Muqing was shocked. "The people growing those human faces all live close to one another? It's contagious? It's contagious. It's contagious?" Shilian had already arrived at the same conclusion. He just didn't announce it aloud so bluntly. Immediately, he commanded, "Isolate them. Disperse the non-affected, and do not let anyone come close to this place. Find a place to quarantine everyone here." A strange, contagious disease. When those words leaked out, it was more effective than any order to disperse troops and strong-arm people away. Not only did the onlooking crowd scatter, more than half the houses on the street emptied out. Shilian ordered the officials and soldiers he had appointed to gear up for protection, and he brought those 20-some people to the outskirts of the capital where some of them already lived. Near the residential areas on the outskirts, there was a large forest called Buyou. The government officials had intended to build a quarantine camp there to temporarily settle the sick. While others were busy building camp, Shilian and his 2 attendants entered the woods. As they walked, a sense of foreboding weighed heavier and heavier on Shilian's mind. Fang Shen and Muqing noticed as well, and it was Fang Shen who spoke up first. "Your Highness, isn't this where Lang Ying?" Shilian clasped his hands behind him, frowning deeply. "Yeah, it was here." Buyou Forest was the very place that Lang Ying had dug a grave bare-handed for his son's corpse. Realizing this, the 3 exchanged looks of dismay. Although they couldn't put their fingers on it, a theory was forming in their minds, compelling them to start searching for the place where Lang Ying had buried the corpse that day. Yet, it had been months since then, and with so many trees in the Buyou Forest, how could they possibly remember the exact tree the child was buried under? Right then, an indescribably foul stench wafted through the air. That disgusting stink was like that of a rotten corpse, but even more suffocating. One breath of it could knock a man out. Others smelled it too and started backing away, covering and fanning at their noses. "What's over there? What's going on? It stinks worse than a 10-year-old pickle jar." Shilian rushed forward and followed that frightful smell, and sure enough, he came to a familiar-looking crooked tree. The earth under the tree was slightly raised, forming a benign-seeming mound. The soldiers brandished their swords and gathered to protect Shilian, but he raised a hand to stop them. "Be careful," he said gravely. Ordinary people, stay behind. The not ordinary Fang Xin retrieved a shovel and approached. After a few shovels, the muddied mound became a ditch. The foul stench grew thicker, and Fang Xin dug more cautiously. After another few shovels, a small black thing was dug out, and it seemed to be squirming. Fang Xin slowed his movement, and the soldiers reacted as if they were facing a great enemy. Suddenly, the earth lurched up. A hugely swollen, bloated body broke out of the soil, exposing itself before the torch-holding crowd. That rotten, foul stench surged into the air, and a great number threw up on the spot. Shilian's pupils shrank. That thing couldn't be described as human anymore. Anything else in the world was more human than that. No one would be able to tell that this gigantic corpse was once a tiny, emaciated child. The urge to vomit rolled up to his throat, and Shilian looked away. Fang Xin and Mu Jing were dumbfounded too, and they called out in shock. What is that thing? Is that a curse or just a rotten corpse? No matter what that thing was, Shilian knew what they needed to do. Stand back! The further the better. I'm going to burn it. He raised his hand, and a stream of flames leapt forth. As the fire blazed and filled the air with thick smoke, the sharp sound of a battle horn sounded from the distant imperial capital, loud and shrill, calling all to attention. The three looked up at the same time. That was the signal for an enemy attack. Fang Xin cursed. Fuck! Of all times they had to come now! Mu Jing's face was dark, and his expression was unreadable under the firelight. Maybe this was intentional? Shilian made the call. Mu Jing, you stay here and take care of this. Fang Xin, you come with me. We'll repel them first. Remember, do not let them notice any weaknesses. It was nighttime. The two of them rushed out of the city in a hurry, and they fought a battle in a hurry. Although the fight came suddenly, they still won. But even though they won, none of the Shinlo soldiers felt the joy of victory, Shilian himself included. The strange disease that had appeared so suddenly came to be called human face disease by the people. Word of it spread through the imperial capital fast as lightning, causing uproar and great unease. The king considered suppressing the news, but the first victim had rampaged in the streets before countless witnesses. So, from the very start, this wasn't something that could be kept under wraps. Besides, the human face disease was spreading rapidly. In a matter of 6 days, over 50 more people found that similar lesions had begun to appear on their bodies. At the same time, the Yang'an sieges were growing more frequent. Attacked from both sides, Shilian could barely find the time to go to Yang'an and create rain. All the spiritual power and energy he allotted for the task was instead spent at the quarantine camp in the capital outskirts. Within chilly Buyou Forest sprawled a large number of simple tents and huts. Shilian crossed over a ground packed with patients. This quarantine had started with 20-some people, but soon ballooned into hundreds, and the number was growing. Every day, if he had time, Shilian would come and use his power to relieve the horrifying symptoms of those afflicted. However, he still couldn't cure the root cause, and what the people truly hoped for was for him to heal them completely. As Shilian walked through the camp, a young man lying on the ground suddenly reached out and tugged at the hem of his robe. Your Highness, I won't die, will I? Shilian was about to respond, but he noticed that this young man looked familiar. Upon a closer look, Wasn't he the passerby who gave him an umbrella on that fateful rainy day when he learned that Shinlo was short on water? In recalling that day, that rain, that umbrella, warmth filled Shilian's heart. He knelt down and gently patted the back of the man's hand. "I will do my best," he told him earnestly. It was as if the man had received the hope to live, and his eyes twinkled with joy. He repeated, "Good, good," as he lay down once more. From the fervent eyes of the sick all around him, Shilian could tell they genuinely believed he would save them. And so, every time he met those eyes, guilt sprouted deep in his heart, and he grew ever more desperate for a cure. After making a round of the quarantine camp, Shilian found a place to sit. Mooching started a campfire, while Shilian himself was lost in thought. Some distance away, a few errand runners walked off carrying a stretcher, whispering quietly to each other, yet somehow their word had reached Shilian's ears. "How many is this now?" "The 4th or 5th, I think." On the stretcher was a patient who died in Buyou Forest. It was actually difficult to die from human face disease. But that fact made it even more frightening. Without the release of death, it meant that those things would stay on the victims' bodies for the rest of their lives. The thought of it alone could make one lose the will to live, especially young women. They cared for their appearance, so if something like that grew somewhere important like their face, most would choose to simply end their own lives. Another sighed. "When will this end?" Another said. "We have His Highness the Crown Prince. We won't lose. Just relax." The first one could not help but make a small complaint. "I am not afraid of losing battles, but with a situation like this, does it matter if we don't lose? It still doesn't make life easier for us civilians," he sighed. Never mind. I'm not complaining. Here, just pretend I said nothing. I said nothing." If Fang Xin were there, he would have immediately rushed up to cuss them out. Mooching, however, simply gave Shilian a look and continued to build the fire without saying a word. Only when those two were completely gone did he comment expressionlessly. "Ignorant commoners only know how to blame others and the heavens. Do they think a martial god has control over everything?" Shilian shook his head. What that man had said held a certain logic. He was a martial god. When he was part of an army, there would be no battles unwon. Yet, at times like these, what use was it to win battles? An army was meant to protect civilians from attack. But if the civilians were being attacked by a plague, didn't that make this advantage nothing but a cruel joke? Just then, the campfire flickered, and another sat down next to Shilian. It was Fang Xin, who had returned. "How is it?" Shilian asked immediately. Fang Xin shook his head. "It was exactly the same as when you searched. There's no trace of Lang Ying in Beiji Hill, and nothing of that strange white-clothed character either. Who knows where they're hiding? And there's no way of confirming that they're even the ones behind this. Also, the Yang'an people were all fine, like we suspected. Not a single case of human face disease." Mooching poked at the fire. "The imperial capital and Beiji Hill are so close to one another. There's no way no one was infected. It's obvious that they must be the ones behind all this." Many were secretly convinced, and it made sense to think that way. But even if they accused Lang Ying of foul play, whether secretly or openly, the man was hidden well away, and they couldn't find any proof. They suspected that human face disease was born from a curse, and that the source of said curse was the corpse of Lang Ying's son. If it was a curse, then it was a good one. It didn't leave any traces for them to investigate, so there was no evidence to confirm their suspicions. And who knew, maybe this human face disease truly was a new, naturally formed plague. There was no way Shilian could draw any conclusions about what the disease actually was, unless they apprehended their suspect. He had rushed to give the upper court a report of his theories, yet as mentioned, Shilian's descent was a transgression, and things between him and heaven had changed. In the past, if he had wanted to report something, he could simply barge into the Palace of Divine Might and scream it directly into Junwu's ear. Now, he had to do it by the books. To explain what that meant, if he was lucky, he could pass his word through to the heavenly officials simply by throwing out hefty sums of merits. If he was unlucky, he might be forced to go through complicated red tape and be tied up by endless delays. And even after all that, it'd still only be some other heavenly officials sent forth. Shilian himself was a heavenly official, and other than Junwu, there were very few who could match him in power, so the other heavenly officials might not even be effective. Junwu carried a heavy burden. He attended to a myriad of affairs every day, so there was no way he could come to Shilian's aid in person. Thus, Shilian's reporting was only for show, and he didn't expect anything to come of it. Moreover, none of that truly consumed Shilian's thoughts. They were consumed by another problem. He spoke those thoughts aloud. If we assume that Yang An used a curse for the sake of defeating the imperial capital, it would have been the most effective to direct the attack at the army. Wouldn't that be the same as opening the gates once the army falls? It wasn't that there were no victims of the human face disease in the army, but compared to civilians, there were very few. Only 3 or 4 examples to be had. Once they had been sent to quarantine, the situation was immediately under control, and nothing spread to the other soldiers. Fang Xin always spoke his mind whenever a thought arose, so he said, "Maybe they think even if they defeat the army, with you around they'd still lose. So they gave up on that and targeted civilians directly." Mu Qing chuckled dryly at this. Fang Xin immediately reacted. "What are you laughing about?" "Nothing. You always manage to bring up good points. I have nothing to say," Mu Qing replied. What annoyed Fang Xin the most was people who pretended to act courteously, but whose real intention was to snipe at others. Thus, Fang Xin ignored Mu Qing completely. "If it was really them, then I'll lose respect for them. Fight honestly on the battlefield if you have the ability. Don't use shady tricks to harm innocent civilians." Shilian wholeheartedly agreed, and he sighed. "I've been thinking these past few days about what exactly causes the infection. We have to know the cause before we can control the disease itself." "Isn't it obvious?" Fang Xin said. "Infections come from close contact. Touching, drinking the same water, eating together, sleeping together, or whatever." Shilian rubbed his forehead. "On the surface, that's not wrong. But take the army, for example. The soldiers all drink and eat and sleep together, and are in closer quarters than most ordinary households. So why aren't more soldiers infected?" Mu Qing furrowed his brow. "So what you mean is, even under the same circumstances, with different physiques, some will be infected and others not." You want to find out just what kind of people are immune to human face disease, right? Shilian raised his head. Mooching, you understand me. That's exactly it. If we can find that out, there might be a way to stop human face disease from spreading. Mooching nodded. Good. Then let's look at it this way. What kind of people are more likely to get infected? What type of patients dominate the quarantine of Buyou Forest? Shilian had walked through the camps countless times these past few days and could answer with his eyes closed. He listed them off immediately. Women, children, teens, seniors, and young men who are smaller in build. So only the weak are infected? Function wondered doubtfully. Should we have the king order for everyone in the capital to work out and strengthen their bodies? Shilian and Mooching both gave him a look, not wanting to respond. After a pause, Function himself added, Wait, that's not right. Obviously not. The first victim that rampaged on the Grand Avenue of Divine Might was a strong, healthy man, so the theory didn't hold up. Just how were the soldiers that had become infected with human face disease different from other soldiers? Shilian thought of many possibilities and tried testing his hypotheses. But no matter from which angle he looked, there wasn't anything obvious that differentiated them from the rest. The characteristics of the infected victims were all across the board. Their looks, their physiques, their social statuses, their temperaments. It was impossible to draw a conclusion based on those criteria. Could the infection really just be a matter of chance? What exactly did the soldiers do to stop the spread of human face disease? Shilian mumbled to himself. In other words, what have they done more often than civilians? When he came to this thought, his eyes suddenly widened and his face paled. At his abrupt halt, Function asked, What's wrong, Your Highness? Have you thought of something? Shilian had indeed thought of something. He had come to a logical conclusion, but at the same time, it was terrifying. Impossible! He blurted, jumping to his feet. No, it shouldn't be like this. That's absurd. Function and Mooching immediately rose too. What is it? Shilian. What is it? What is it? Shilian held his forehead and paced back and forth, raising his hand. Hold on. I have a ridiculous guess. It shouldn't be true, but I need to test it out. What guess exactly? Mooching asked. How will you test it? Do you need me to find you someone? Shilian immediately rejected the idea. No, we can't use a live person for testing. What if I'm wrong? He hoped he was wrong. Even better if he was way off the mark. Mooching frowned. Your Highness, if you need to ascertain whether you're right or wrong, you'll need a live person for testing. That's the best way. Just standing here brooding won't do any good. Function frowned too. Can't you see he's troubled? Stop saying such things at a time like this. Mooching turned to him. Weird. What exactly did I say? Didn't I speak the truth? At this point, what's the use of being indecisive and hesitating? Function was repulsed. Do you have to judge everything based on how useful it is? We're talking about a live person here. Not even a bit of hesitation. Aren't you a little too collected? Collected? Mooching countered. You actually want to say cold-blooded, right? Shilian didn't have the patience to diffuse the fight between the two like he usually did and scolded them. The two of you can start an argument over a single word. What a disgrace. Stand here for 1 incense time. No one's allowed to move within that time. Same old rules. Hearing the words same old rules had Function and Mooching's faces changing color. Shilian waved his hand. Heaven officials' blessings. Start. A moment later, Function said through gritted teeth. Blessings shine from up high. Muqing gritted his teeth too. High imitation. No thought. Fang Shen was in trouble. Thought. He was deep in arduous thought, trying to come up with a way to continue. Shilian turned to enter Buyou Forest to find the 3 soldiers who were infected for questioning. Regarding the same old rules, this was a method Shilian had come up with to distract his companions. Fang Shen and Muqing would snipe at each other every chance they got, starting petty disputes from nothing at all. At first, Shilian would make them stand in silence for 1 incense time without speaking to each other until they calmed down, but this tactic wasn't very effective. It was then that Shilian decided to try idiom training. Tempted with a chance to have an objective winner and loser, they'd lose all sight of their original conflict and would instead focus on crushing the other in training idioms. The world became decidedly more peaceful after Shilian discovered this effective method, and he was quite pleased. Forcing them to train idioms now was also an attempt to make everyone ease up a little. And yet this ease didn't last long. After 1 incense time, Shilian returned. His face was extremely grim when he gave his instructions. Bring me all the soldiers who lived in the same quarters as the infected. I need to question them. The 2 of them had each been stuck down during several of their own turns, and had also each seized their own little victories, so upon being released from training idioms, they both sighed in relief. We will, Muqing said. But your findings might not be accurate if you use such a roundabout method to gather evidence. Fang Shen had already turned to heed his orders. Shilian called him back. Wait! It's already deep into the night. Questioning them now would cause too much of a stir, and we can't call forth too many at a time either. It'd be too conspicuous. The things I want to ask must not be made known or allowed to leak. If you go now, we won't be able to conceal anything. Fang Shen turned his head. Then what should I do? Bring them to you 1 by 1 to have you interrogate them privately? There's no other way, Shilian said. Tomorrow, bring the soldiers who are close to the victims to my chambers 1 by 1. And don't let them know that others have been questioned. Remember to order them not to tell anyone. Otherwise... He breathed deeply inside. Never mind, just threaten them. Just say if word gets out, they shall be executed without mercy. The harsher, the better. Questioning them 1 by 1. How long will that even take? Muqing commented. It doesn't matter how long it takes, Shilian stated. The more I ask, the more sure I'll be. I absolutely need to get to the bottom of this. There can't be any confusions. Thus, the next day, Shilian sat in the chamber that had been temporarily assigned to him atop the towers and personally interrogated over 300 soldiers. As for the questions he posed, all 300 of them gave the same answers. With every soldier questioned, Shilian's face grew a shade darker. When that was done and Fang Shen and Muqing entered the room, they saw Shilian sitting by the table, forehead propped up on his hand, unspeaking. It was a while before he slowly began to speak. You 2 stay and guard the city gates. I'm going to take a trip to Mount Taikang. Fang Shen hesitantly asked. Your Highness? Did you find something out from the interrogations? Is it a curse, or... Shilian nodded. That much has become clear. It's a curse. Muqing was sullen. You're certain? Without a doubt, Shilian said. I also found out what kind of people are infected, and what kind aren't. Despite his declaration, there was not a trace of joy on his face from solving the mystery. Feng Shen and Mu Qing felt things might not be that simple, but if Shilian didn't take the initiative to tell them, then as his subordinates, it wasn't their place to ask. Their hearts sank. At Mount Taikang, the royal holy temple, the highest peak, the palace of divine might, the state preceptor was paying his respects within the soft curling clouds of incense smoke. Shilian crossed the threshold of the hall and immediately cut straight to the point. State preceptor, I need to see the heavenly emperor. The state preceptor finished paying his respects and turned his head. Your Highness, the gates of the heavenly realm no longer open to you. I know, Shilian said, but right now, I have ascertained that the kingdom of Shinle is currently under attack by a malicious curse that has never been seen before. This is not a natural disaster, it is the work of inhuman creatures. Please help me. Request that the Heavenly Emperor descend and possess your body so I can report this information to him directly. Maybe he will know the source of this and help find a solution. Since his return to the mortal realm, he had reported to the palace of divine might 3 times. The first 2 times weren't sincere. They were only done out of habitual courtesy. This time, he was genuinely seeking for help. The state preceptor sat down on a chair. It's not that I don't want to help you, Your Highness, but there's no longer a need for it, he said. Even if I give you a hand now and have the Heavenly Emperor descend and possess my body, the answer you will receive from him will only disappoint you. Shilian's expression dropped slightly. Do you know something? Do you know what that white-clothed creature wearing the crying, smiling mask truly is? Your Highness, do you still remember what I told you? The state preceptor asked. In this world, fortune, good or bad, is predetermined. Shilian was taken aback and didn't respond. Originally, many of those from Yang'an were destined to die, the state preceptor continued. But you transferred water, created rain, and gave them a breath of relief. Yet you cannot save them completely from the drought, cannot settle their futures, so now they are in the Yang'an army upon Beiji Hill, fighting for that future. Originally, the imperial capital was destined to decline, but then you personally descended and used your own powers to turn things around and gave the imperial capital a breath of relief. Yet you didn't steel your heart to annihilate the Yang'an rebel army and root them out. Instead, you allowed them to survive until now, and like cockroaches, they only grow stronger with each battle. Your Highness, may I ask what you're hoping to accomplish? The state preceptor asked him in wonder. Are you perhaps waiting for both sides to realize their mistakes? To repent and be born anew? To reunite as one country once more? An odd sense of shame budded within Shilian's heart, yet it soon turned into confusion as he thought. That's strange. I saved people and protected people because they were innocent and didn't deserve death. Everything I've done was only done after serious consideration. And every choice was made after much struggle. Yet, why does it all sound so laughable coming from another's mouth? Why does it sound like I've achieved nothing? That everything I've done is such a failure. To be continued.